Welcome, my sister Justice.
Thank you, Danny. My name is Justice, and I'm an alcoholic and an addict. By God's grace, I've been kept sober since March 8th of 2015, and that is a miracle. I always say that right before I get to speak because I'm not really supposed to be here, you know? And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. Anyhow, my pronouns are he, him, and his, but depending on the gig, it's she, her, and hers. Tonight's outfit is appropriate, so it's he, him, and his tonight. I was told from the very beginning by one of my first sponsors that whenever I'm at the podium to speak from the heart and to tell the truth. So tonight I won't be shoveling any lies at y'all. I will be giving y'all my full truth. Now, if you hear my phone go off, I've set a real cute little spiritual timer so that way I'm not like running over, okay? So, I was born in Chicago, Illinois. I'm the baby of 5, which is kind of crazy. I've got like a long distance between me and my older siblings. And we were in this cute little neighborhood that we affectionately called the Hood. And in that neighborhood, there were like, you know, your normal hood things that you grow up seeing, like alcoholics and drug addicts running around the streets doing crazy things, and it was just a normal thing. And I remember early on knowing what drug addicts were and what alcoholics were, and I also knew that if they were an addict or alcoholic, they just lived that way and died that way, because nobody ever got sober where I came from. My father was a pimp and a con man, like a literal pimp, and he was out of the picture really early on, and my mom became a Christian missionary, like a devout Christian missionary early on, so that was like a real weird mix. I don't really know how they got together, but they did, and they made 5 babies together, and I'm the baby of all of that. Anyway, by the time he left, my mom was really into keeping all of us into the church, and so I was at church all the time. I sang in the choir, I went to vacation Bible school, I was at Sunday school, like I was all of the above. Now, mind you, I knew I was gay ever since I was in kindergarten, and I can remember hearing a whole lot of hate speech from my family and from other people who I was around that were in the church. Now, I'm not saying any of that to say anything negative against people who go to church or who have faith or have religion. That was just the experience that I had with those people. By the time I was in 5th grade, my mom decided she wanted to move us all out of Chicago, and we moved to Las Cruces, New Mexico, which is a complete opposite of big city. And she wanted to move us out of there because the neighborhood was really terrible, and the kids who grew up in that neighborhood didn't grow up to have careers. They grew up to be career criminals or drug addicts or alcoholics, and my mom didn't want that for us. I don't know. Here I am. So we moved to Las Cruces, New Mexico. I was in the 5th grade. It was a little difficult at first making friends. I remember feeling very different from everybody early on. Some of my earliest memories of like tools that I knew how to use was to lie and to hide who I was from everybody because I didn't feel like I would be accepted or liked or loved or even being able to stay at home. And New Mexico was interesting. It's a very beautiful place. I didn't appreciate it for what it was while I was there. I started using and drinking very early on. By the time I was 13, or at 13, I changed the way I felt for the first time. And I hoofed glue with this kid named Zeke. I totally had a crush on him. And I hoofed glue with him, and it seemed like really stupid, and we did it, and we giggled and laughed, and I went back home. But that was the start of my experimentation phase, and I wanted to experience all the things. Now, I'd love to tell you that the reasons why I started to drink or the reasons why I started to get high is because of this trauma or that trauma or because of whatever. That's not my truth. The childhood I had was fairly decent. I imagine that all other kids went through some of the stuff that I went through, and I found out later on that that's not exactly true. But those weren't the reasons that I got high and drank. By the time I was 14, I was full into the experimentation phase, and alcohol and cocaine became a big part of my life. I was decent in school. I made really good grades up until I found alcohol and drugs, and then I really decided that partying and trying to fit in with other people was really important to me. I was a really short, very chubby, very effeminate child, and so I'd gotten picked on a lot, so it meant a lot to me to be liked by people. I really wanted to find people who liked me, and alcohol and drugs gave me the opportunity to fit in, so I thought. I can remember the first time I came back to my mom's apartment, and I was completely wasted, and I snuck into the apartment, and I crept past her bedroom, and I just wanted to make it into my room to close the door to go to bed so I wouldn't get caught. But my mom was like a hound dog, and she always knew everything. So that started this cycle for me of the continued hiding, the continued seeking out for alcohol and drugs and parties. And once I realized that the person who had the drugs and the alcohol at the party was the most popular person at the party, I decided that I wanted to be that person who had all the things and who was super popular. And so I made friends with drug dealers. And I don't know what it was about Las Cruces, New Mexico, but I could walk into a store and buy alcohol underage and nobody said a single thing. I don't know why. Maybe I looked older, I don't know. Maybe they didn't care, but that's what happened. So I was able to buy alcohol by like 8th grade. And at the last day of 8th grade, I got into some major trouble. Now, this is gonna start a cycle that's repetitive for me, is I get high and loaded, I act a fool, and I end up in handcuffs or on probation. So the last day of 8th grade, I got in trouble. It landed me in handcuffs. I had a weapon on school campus, and they didn't like that too much. And so I ended up getting long-term suspended. So my whole my first part of freshman year, that first semester, I had to spend in alternative school. And I don't know if any of you have ever been to alternative school, but that's where like all the bad kids who know how to do all the bad things are at. So I just really learned how to do more bad shit so I can get myself in more trouble. Now, I'll tell you, I didn't see anything wrong with my behaviors at the time. I thought I was just a kid having a good time. I was experimenting with alcohol and drugs. That's what kids do. I didn't see any consequences coming my way. I certainly didn't think being suspended from school long-term was a major consequence. I thought it was like small potatoes. But other people could see that these consequences were not good. And I remember hearing my mom and my sisters and all of them, those frothy emotional appeals, and it didn't suffice for me because I continued to seek out and to try to fill whatever this thing was inside of me that was obviously empty, and later on to find out it was a God hole. By the time I was back into high school, officially, I had found going to Mexico was really fun because we're on the border of Texas, which is right on the border of Juarez, Mexico. And so going to Mexico and drinking was a huge deal for us. Me and a lot of kids would go. I've had friends who died from drunk driving accidents on the way back, and that wasn't enough to really scare me straight. Before I turned 16 years old, things had gotten a little bit more out of control. By that time, I was experimenting with all party drugs, and I thought myself to be an avid little raver boy. And I drank a lot, and I ditched school a lot, and I'd gotten in a lot of trouble. And my mom had found this picture. Well, let me rewind. October of my 16th year of living, I did drag for the first time. And I dressed up as an old lady with my friend Martin, and we went bag snatching. I don't know if y'all know what bag snatching is, but it's where somebody snatches your bag of candy when you're trick-or-treating. It's not very nice. I don't snatch people's candy anymore, so don't judge me. I see some of y'all judging me already. But that's what happened, and we took pictures. It was quite hilarious. And I had this little gay drawer where I held all of my things that were potentially gay or pointing me to being gay in this drawer because I didn't want my mom to ever find out. Anyway, she ended up finding the drawer, and she brought the picture out to me, and she was like completely losing it. And it was at the worst time because it was the first night I was going to go to this gay club in El Paso that I'd been dying to go to. And so we had a huge fight, and I stormed out. And I went out and I got loaded. And I remember coming home and we didn't talk for a few days. I got removed from school because my principal had a little conference with myself and my mom and said that I wasn't doing very well in school. I was a menace to the school. I didn't have enough credits to graduate, that they may as well pull me out of school so I can get my GED. And so I told my mom, yes, that's exactly what I want to do, so they pulled me out of school. Shortly after, my mom gave me the speech that birds gotta fly, fish gotta swim, and you've gotta get out of my house. So I was 16 years old, almost 17 years old, and I was having to figure out how to be a freaking adult. And I had zero skills. I was uneducated because I had dropped out of school. The only things I really knew how to do were drink and party and buy drugs and sell drugs. So I did what any responsible adult would do, is an eeny, meeny, miny, mo of where I'm gonna live. And I landed on Tucson, Arizona, which is where I knew only one couple. There were a couple that I used to drink and smoke with who had moved there, and I asked them if I could come stay with them, and they said yes. And so I got on a bus, and I moved me and all of my belongings to Tucson, Arizona. Now this is where things got really crazy for me because I felt like I was finally free to do whatever it is that I wanted to do. I immediately started drinking more, using more. The cycle got a little out of control. The next thing I know, I was able to get a job, right? And I was able to get an apartment. And I remember having my first apartment, and I actually saw the lease all the way through. It was the only lease I had seen all the way through in my young adult life. I ended up moving 7 ravers into my apartment where we all used to get around and drink and use together in a 1-bedroom apartment with my cat. I really didn't have good judgment at the time. But hey, I was young and I was having fun and I didn't see any consequences. I was real delusional. I'm gonna speed up the story because it just continues to spiral downward. Somewhere along the line, I had found crystal meth, and that became my enslaver. Alcohol was also a very large persuader for me also. So I worked in and out of bars and restaurants and clubs and moonlighting as the dope man, because as much as I told myself I never wanted to be like my father, when I was a teenager, I would see these drug dealers with all these friends and all this money, and I wanted to be the next Black Tony Montana. And so I decided that that's what I was gonna do, and I was gonna be good at it. And I wasn't very good at it because I ended up getting caught a lot. And if I wasn't getting caught for drugs, I was getting caught for acting a fool in the streets, and it was always alcohol related, always drug related. By the time I got into my 30s, the relationship between my family and I had been very distanced. I didn't feel like I could be accepted other than by my sisters. And I had been trying to establish a connection with my mother. And I ended up, kind of smoothing things over a bit to where we could have some visits, and I would go to visit her in San Antonio periodically because she had moved from New Mexico to San Antonio. And she was diagnosed with colon cancer. And when she was diagnosed with colon cancer, I went down there to go see her. And I was a hot mess, by the way. I was 146 pounds, soaking wet, and just a mess. And I stayed long enough for her to have her surgery, and I went back to Tucson, Arizona. And for the next year, I tried to drown myself in alcohol and drugs. And I kept as little contact with my family as I possibly could because I didn't want anybody to see me spiraling downward. I started to have bouts of homelessness after that first apartment. It started with couch surfing, and I would go to stay at a friend's house and I'd sleep on their couch. And then that friend, for some reason or another, would get tired of me, or I would do something or not do something, and I'd have to kick rocks and go on to the next place. And then I became real homeless, where I didn't have anywhere to go, where nobody was willing to open the door for me or let me sleep on their couch anymore. I became that unwelcomed hanger-on that it talks about in the big book. And still I didn't see it. Still I was so delusional that I couldn't see that the problem was in here, and I kept pointing my finger outward because the problem was always somebody or something else. I refused to take responsibility. I moved to San Antonio on accident in 2011. By that time, I was an intravenous drug user who had just gotten out of the grips of the Arizona State Police. And I don't know how that happened. It was a total God thing because I should have been imprisoned for quite a long time for a large amount of drugs. And they let me go. And I decided it'd be a good idea to go visit my mom. I was going to visit for just a week. So I packed a small backpack and a little suitcase, and I came to visit my mom in 2011. And I never left. My mom was a lot sicker than what I knew, and I'm really grateful that it happened the way that it did because I got to spend the last 4 months of her life with her. And we got to work out a whole lot of things that were left unsaid before. And when my mom passed, that's when I really took the hardest dive, and I lost my mind, and I just couldn't deal with being justice anymore. And so I decided at that time that first I got the insurance money, and the insurance money kept me loaded for a good period of time. And I decided to buy a whole lot of drag. And then I started living in drag as Jasmine 24/7. And then I got arrested in drag several times because she was always doing the most. And then when the insurance money left and I didn't bother to get an apartment. I didn't bother to get a house. I bought a car and lots of hotel rooms and lots of bars. And anyway, when that money ran out, I had to think on my feet. And like the good drug addict alcoholic that I was, my next recourse was stealing and escorting. And so that's exactly the way I lived my life for at least the next year and a half. I was on probation. I'd been on probation on and off since my teenage years. But this particular time that I was on probation, I had this probation officer that was totally weird. He talked to me like a human being, and he didn't treat me like he was my authoritarian. He kind of felt like an uncle. So that was a new experience for me. But I remember coming out from under a bridge downtown San Antonio off of 37, and the sun was on its way up, and a thought hit me, and the thought was, you're gonna die this way, under a bridge, in drag, and what are your nieces and nephews gonna think? What are your sisters gonna say about you? What is anybody gonna say about you at your funeral while they're standing over your casket? Who's gonna pay for your funeral, girl? And that thought really bothered me. I was like, oh my God, like completely shook. So I got high, and I went to go see my probation officer. And I thought to myself that if I didn't say something to this man, that reality that I thought of would come true. And so for the first time ever in my life, I got really honest with somebody. And I told him that if I didn't receive some help, that if he didn't help me particularly, that I was gonna die in the streets. And I tried to manipulate it and say, if you don't help me, it's gonna be your fault that I die in the streets. Of course, it's not his fault. But he had some mercy on me, and he went to the judge on my behalf, and he asked the judge if they could send me to treatment. And the judge agreed to send me to treatment. Now, mind you, I'm thinking I'm about to go someplace that's really fabulous, and I'm gonna have acupuncture, and I'm gonna ride horses, doodling and stuff, like something real cute. I can take naps. They have a really nice chef. Like, that is not the place that they were sending me. When I was given permission to go, they gave me a date of when I needed to be there to go to treatment. And I was like, okay, I'll be there. And in good old alcoholic addict fashion, I started getting loaded, and the date came where I needed to go, and that important thing was not met because I was getting loaded. So they had to come and get me eventually by way of police officers. Police officers have always shown up in the form for me as like a godsend. It's like, hey, there are the police to take you away from all of your craziness because you're out here acting a fool. So they took me to jail, and I sat in jail for like a month and a half before they sent me to treatment. And I went to treatment at a place called SATF, Substance Abuse Treatment Facility. It's for probation violators. And they've got like barbed wire fences, and they've got armed guards there. and they don't treat you very nice. And you're all in this big, huge room on bunk beds, and it was not the idea that I had in my mind, and I was not having it. But at the same time, I really didn't know what else to do, and I had nothing else that I could do. I just had to be there. So I submitted to being there. And while I was there, I had this probation officer / counselor, and she pulled me aside, and she told me that she wanted to make me the dorm leader. Now, mind you, I was still super skinny. I had like 0 eyebrows on my face. It was very apparent that I was the only loud, effeminate homosexual in that group, and they were gonna make me in charge of the whole group, and that seemed really scary. But I did it, and that taught me something. It taught me that I could do things that I didn't think I could. I didn't think I could stay sober, but I went to treatment in hopes that they might be able to save me. While I was there for 4.5 months. They told me some real important stuff. Some of the most important stuff before I left is, if you want to stay sober when you leave here, you need to do what sober people do. You need to get a sponsor, you need to go to meetings, and you need to work the steps. And I'm like, okay, I got it. Go to meetings, get a sponsor, work the steps. Okay, I got it, let me loose. And they let me loose. Now, before they let me loose, they helped me to get into an Oxford house because I was homeless still. I had nowhere to go. And so I got out, I went to the Oxford house, and they told me to let go of my old people, places, and things. And the first thing I did is I contacted a few of my old friends because I wanted to show them that I was sober. And they invited me to come over, and so I went over. And I kept telling myself I'm not gonna get high while I'm there because I've got what it takes, because I just got out of treatment and I've been sober for 4.5 months. And so I went there, and by the time I left, I was not sober anymore. I went back to that Oxford house, and thank God that those men caught me in the dark of the living room, tweaking on the floor, and they evicted me, or they asked me to leave rather, because they couldn't allow me to stay there. And I had no other choice but to go to the homeless shelter. So I lived at Haven for Hope. I lived there for a duration of 9 months. When I got there, I realized that I don't know how to live my own life, and I don't know how to be a responsible adult, and I most certainly don't know how to be a sober person. So I needed some help. And then I immediately came up with an idea of how I was going to fix my life. Because see, I'm the smartest person I know if you let me tell it. And that's just not reality. It's just not reality. So I decided, though, that I was going to get my GED while I was living at the homeless shelter, and I did. I decided I was going to enroll in community college, and I did. And then I also said, well, maybe I should start going to some meetings. So I started frequenting some meetings at Lambda. Now, I want to preface that by saying this. This was not the first time I had ever gone to a meeting. The first time I went to a meeting, I went there because I wanted to look good before I went to court. And I went to a meeting of Cocaine Anonymous, and I thought everybody was weird, and they were being all nice and trying to hug me, and I knew for certain that there was an ulterior motive. Somebody wanted something. And I left there before they had an opportunity to talk to me too long, and I tried to get this paper signed and all of that. So I went to Lambda. At Lambda, I tried to pull the same move where I would go in and I'd sit down in the back and I wouldn't talk to people. And when everybody circled up to pray, that's when it was time for me to tip out. Or I'd leave right after the prayer because I wasn't interested in necessarily making friends. I just wanted to go and just sit back and listen. I hadn't quite put down drugs and alcohol yet, but I wasn't using and drinking the way I used to. And I thought that that was good for me. It was well enough for me to, get through a semester or two of community college. I moved out of the homeless shelter, and in March of 2015, I was arrested for the last time with a whole lot of methamphetamine. And the reality kicked in while I was sitting in jail that every time I've ever tried to fix my life, I've failed. And that all those people who were sitting in Alcoholics Anonymous, who were talking about how their lives got better, they all legitimately seemed to have good lives. They had decent cars, they smiled and laughed, and nobody ever tried to get anything from me while I was there. So I thought to myself, well, maybe I should do something. And God sent somebody my way. There's a friend of mine who I used to use with who had gotten sober. And he went looking for me because we both went to the same community college, and he didn't see me anymore because I was gone. I was in jail. And he wrote me a letter, and he asked me to put him on my visitations list. And I did, and he came to visit me. And he 12-stepped me while I was in jail. He told me that he's going to love me no matter what as a brother, and that if I choose to use, that he'll love me from a distance. But if I choose to get and stay sober, that he can help me. And that he'd already talked to some guys at this Oxford house, and that they'd be willing to allow me to come and sleep on their couch for a while. And I didn't think they were going to let me out of jail, honestly. I thought I was going to TDC. And he said, trust God. And if you're supposed to be out, then they'll let you out. And sure enough, they ended up letting me out. And I counted that as a blessing. And I did not pass go, and I went straight to that Oxford house. That was in 2015. When I got to the program and when I came into Oxford House, I was not a vision for you. I was not one of the... I just was not. I came here with a whole set of behaviors and attitudes that needed to be adjusted. I came in somewhat humble but bougie. I came in entitled, but I was also at a place where I was willing to do whatever it took in order to not go back to jail and in order to not be homeless again. That was originally my intent when I came to recovery, is I just didn't want to be homeless anymore, and I didn't want to go back to jail or prison. Later on, of course, I ended up staying for a whole different reason. I went back to Lambda because that Oxford house I lived at was right down the street from Lambda, and everybody who went to that house went to Lambda. And so I went, and there's a gentleman there who used to see me all the time. He used to see me at San Antonio College, really crazy looking, and he used to see me when I'd pop into Lambda, and his name is Celso, Z. And he said, hey, Queen. And I was like, hey, girl, hey. And he's like, how you doing? And he knew exactly how I was doing because I came in looking crazy. Mind you, the only thing I owned at that point in time were the clothes on my back. Everything else that I owned was gone. Or as I like to say, everything that I owned, I willingly gave up because of the decisions that I made over and over again. And I told him, I said, well, I'm not doing okay. I have a fresh set of felonies and I just got out of jail. And I just moved in this sober house and I don't have any money or a job. But I need a sponsor. Will you be my sponsor? And he put his hand on my shoulder and he cocked his head to the side and he's like, I'm not the easier, softer sponsor. I didn't know what he was talking about because I'd never heard the words easier, softer. And if they said it in a meeting, I certainly didn't pay attention and I had never opened up that book. So I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm thinking you can't be tougher than me. He was pretty tough though. But that's exactly what I needed. And I'll never forget the feeling that I felt when I first realized that Alcoholics Anonymous was embracing me with love. My old sponsor taught me some very good lessons, and they required levels of humility. And one of the first things that he told me to do is that I needed to get honest with the group. I needed to introduce myself and get honest and tell everybody all of my tea. And I'm like, are you serious? You want me to tell him everything? And he's like, yes. So I did. I raised my hand and I said, hi, my name is Justice and I'm an alcoholic. I have, whatever many days sober, or months rather, because I was in jail. And that I didn't own any clothes other than what was on my back. I had a fresh set of felonies, and I didn't have a job, and I was just moved in a sober house, and I felt so small for just a minute until everybody started clapping after I got done talking, and I was like, why are they clapping so loud? Like, it was so uncomfortable. My sponsor at the time told me that I needed to make 90 meetings in 90 days. And he said, that doesn't mean you go to 2 meetings in a day and you're going to count that as 2 meetings every day for the next 90 days. You need to be in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. He said, you need to figure out where your home is at. So if this is where you want to be at home and call this your home group, then you need to have a service commitment here in this home, which means that if you show up to that meeting every day, you need to do something. Make some coffee, help clean up, whatever it may be. So I did. I showed up to that meeting every day, and I made coffee. I was a coffee queen. And slowly, over the next week or so, people started showing up to that meeting with bags of clothes for me, bags of underwear and t-shirts. There's an old timer there. His name is Andy M. And he saw me walking one morning, and I was walking out to go and apply for jobs. And he pulled over on the side of the road and told me to get in the car and asked me where I was going. And he took me to go have breakfast tacos and coffee. And he said, before you go looking for a job, because he asked me what kind of job I'm looking for. I was looking for a restaurant job. And he took me to Sass Shoes, and he bought me a very nice, expensive pair of serving shoes, non-slip shoes, so I can have a recovery job. Now, these men and women at Alcoholics Anonymous did not ask me for anything. They did not demand anything of me. All they did was continue to love me even when I was a hot ass mess. And that really started to warm up my heart, because I couldn't remember a time that I was so raw and vulnerable with another human being, and to experience that kind of unconditional love. So that was amazing for me. I began working the steps, and my sponsor was very thorough. I was grateful that I got to sit down with him every week and read the first 164 pages of the big book, page by page, together. I won't get into each and every step that I took, but I'll give you some highlights. Step one was pretty easy for me because I was beaten and battered and torn on down, but my idea and concept of a power greater than myself was a bit skewed because I had a lot of prejudice because of the experiences that I had with church and me being gay. And I'm so grateful for the big book because it lets me know that all I really need is just the willingness to believe in something greater than myself, and that I don't have to take on anybody else's conception of what God is. And that helped me not to see Alcoholics Anonymous as a cult or like some kind of weird church organization, which is what I originally thought because I kept hearing God. And whenever I heard the word God, my ears would snap shut because I didn't want to hear any of that. As I continued to work the steps and as I continued to do the best I could, and I showed up every day and I made coffee and I started to move up the service chain, and I went from making coffee to cleaning cigarette butts at another meeting, and I went from cleaning cigarette butts to standing out in front of the door of the meeting to greet everybody that came in. See, I was taught early on that if I wanted to keep what I've got to be able to give that away, that I've got to be able to perform service. And service has taken a different look throughout the years. I mean, service has been everything from cleaning ashtrays to twirling in a pair of 6-inch stilettos and snatching a crown in Dallas. Service has really changed the face of my recovery, and I'm so grateful for that. I was taught that whenever I was given an opportunity to be of service, that my answer is always yes. Because when I needed Alcoholics Anonymous was there for me. A lot of folks that I would talk to like to speak about the promises, and I want to say, in those 9th step, it talks about being amazed before you're halfway through, and Lord knows, before I was halfway through the steps, I didn't necessarily see or feel amazement, but what I did feel was something that my sponsor helped me to realize. And I said, I called him up one day and I was like, Sel, and he's like, what's up, girl? And I'm like, I am really extremely bored. And he's like, huh? I said, yeah, I'm bored. And he said, okay, let's answer some questions. He said, do you have a roof over your head? I said, yeah. He said, do you have a little money in your pocket? I said, yeah. He said, are you sober? I said, yeah, I'm sober. He said, do you have cigarettes? Because I was smoking cigarettes at the time. I said, yeah, I got cigarettes. He said, girl, maybe what you're experiencing is serenity and you don't know what it looks like because you're so used to causing chaos. Cracked. Correct. I got to experience serenity for the first time, and I didn't even know what it looked like because I was used to the chaos, because I was used to a life that wouldn't allow me an opportunity to sleep. I wouldn't allow myself an opportunity to sleep or to rest or to stop creating this environment where at any time my freedom could be taken or my life could be taken. One of the major things that I get to experience today as a sober man is this immense amount of peace in my life. I can walk down the street with my head held high and not have to look over my shoulder. I get to go to sleep at night. I have a nice, cozy little apartment that I pay rent at with money that I've earned legally. I haven't been arrested since 2015, and that's a blessing. I don't even recognize my life today. I was going to school at San Antonio College. I was about a year and a half sober because my sponsor at the time told me that I didn't need to make any major changes for the first year of my sobriety. No relationships, don't move, don't go back to school, don't do anything but stay sober, because I didn't know how to do that. And so I stayed sober for that year, and then I took it a step further and waited 6 more months to actually go into school. And so I started going to school at San Antonio College. I had plans, and my plans were I was going to major in business, and I was still a touch of delusional, and I thought maybe I was gonna work in finance, but finance, they're not gonna hire you when you have a lot of felonies for drugs, honey. So God probably looked down at me and was like, bless her heart, and decided that he was going to put an opportunity in front of me. See, I don't know the difference between a blessing and a tragedy sometimes. And I was given an opportunity. I was also majorly of service in Oxford House. Let me say that too. I held a lot of positions in Oxford House, which is a sober living, and I was really of service in Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, I was approached and I was given an opportunity to work for the organization, and I turned it down because I had plans. And so I talked to my sponsor about it, because that's another thing I learned in Alcoholics Anonymous, is that I get to use another alcoholic as a sounding board to make sure that my decisions are not what they used to be before. And so my sponsor told me I needed to do some work around it, and I needed to ask some questions and figure it out and pray about it and get back to him. And eventually, he was like, well, maybe you just need to peer in and see what that's all about. So I got hired on with Oxford House at 2.5 years sober, the organization that was assisting me in my recovery by giving me a safe, sober place to live. And I started working as an outreach worker, getting to help people in the San Antonio, New Braunfels, and Seguin area. Also keeping service commitments and meeting with my sponsor and all of that good stuff. See, in my heart, I have a heart to help. And it amazed me, because all of the behaviors that I had displayed when I was drinking and using that would have told me otherwise, when that little voice in my head starts to tell me something different than what my actions are dictating, I can take a look at my actions. And if my actions are aligning with doing what I'm supposed to do, then all of those other things become lies. All those other voices become lies. Working in the recovery field has been extremely awesome. That's a part of, I guess, a part of my journey of being a sober man, is that I learned how to be employable, and I learned how to keep a job. Before working for Oxford House, I kept the same job at the same restaurant for those 2.5 years. I was able to be honest about who I am today. And one of the largest bright spots that I can think of in my life has been the men and women that I've had the opportunity to sponsor, and how much they have helped me in my recovery. I didn't think that this was gonna work. I was one of those skeptical folks who came to Alcoholics Anonymous. I was desperate and I was willing to do whatever it took, but I didn't honestly think it was gonna work for me. And just kept putting one foot in front of the other, and here I am, almost 6 years later, and I haven't had a drop of alcohol or not a tap of drugs in my system. And that's a miracle. That is a miracle. I always like to speak about what I'm grateful for while I have a chance to at the podium. And the first thing I'm grateful for is to the old timers who came before me and who turned on the lights and made the coffee and set up the chairs and saved a seat just for me because they knew one day I was going to need it. Those are the same old timers who put me underneath their arm and who loved me while I was sick and nursed me back to health and told me the truth about my alcoholism and told me the truth about the solution, where I can find it, and how I can apply it to my life. I'm extremely grateful to the newcomers who continue to come in and show me that it still sucks out there, that it has not gotten any better. And they give me purpose and allow me an opportunity to suit up and show up the way that my higher power wants me to. I'm also extremely grateful to the Bexar County Adult Probation Department who saw something in me, which was recovery, and decided that I no longer needed to be held in their custody. It was also really awkward for them when I was showing up on a professional level to do presentations for them, and they're like, weren't you just in here? Like, because you're on probation? I'm like, yeah, that was then, this is now, get with it. Like, I'm in a suit, this is totally new, girl, stay with me. I'm also really grateful for good sponsorship, for the men and women who have taken and devoted their time to help show me how to walk this path and show me how to be a man with dignity and integrity who employs principles like honesty. I can be vulnerable today. And that's one of the most amazing, freeing, and most humbling experiences that I've ever had in my entire life. I moved to, this is my first of two little alarms letting me know to wrap it up, girl. I moved here to Dallas in May of last year, and it could not have been a worse time for a relocation. But God was working in my life because staying on this job and doing the best I could and showing up every day, suiting up and showing up and putting principles first, God has awarded me opportunities for moving up with the organization that I worked for. So I got promoted twice, and the second promotion required me to relocate. So I really didn't have much to say about when my relocation was. So moving here during a pandemic was difficult, to say the least. And I can tell you that even at almost 6 years sober, if I'm not careful, those voices from my disease can start working again and start chatting in my ear, telling me this, that, or the other, and allowing me to think that separation from you guys is what I need, when the real truth is connection to you is what's always kept me sane, safe, and sober. I am so grateful for the opportunity to get up here and bare my alcoholic addict soul in front of y'all. This is my new home group, and I'm so glad to say that I'm Justice and I'm an alcoholic and I'm at home. Thank you guys for letting me share.